Hey, what's up? This is Brendan, VFX Supervisor and Emerging Tech Director at Bonfire, Manhattan-based VFX shop. This is Unreal tutorial number 2. I'm going to take you guys through how to build a scene from scratch from Megascan assets and some other things, as well as how to make some custom materials and how to do some vertex painting on those different materials. So if you're not familiar with how to open Unreal or anything like that, check out tutorial number 1 where I walk through how to download Quixel, Unreal, and get everything set up, and hopefully that will help you guys get rolling. I've already created a project here and imported a bunch of different assets, as you can see from the marketplace and from Quixel, so we're just going to jump right in. I have an empty scene here, nothing's in it, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag an HDRI backdrop in. If you don't know what this is, it's awesome. Basically what it does is recreate, the sphere of the Earth. You can see down here, this is the geometry. It's an envirodome, so flat, curved. It's a dome. That's kind of how it works. You can see it's warping here along the edge of the dome, and if you pull up your projection center, you can see it even more clearly. Kind of where that split is, where that line goes vertical. And it's really cool because you can kind of skew this however you want based on whatever angle you're trying to get for a cinematic, especially for a game. It might be a little different, but right now we're going to be making a cinematic today, and hopefully making it as close to photoreal as possible. So once you've got that HDR backdrop in there, you can kind of find the right angle, get everything situated. This is one of the epic stock HDRIs that's really sharp and well captured and beautiful. But let's say you wanted to use your own, or you wanted to convert an image that you found that was a 360 panoramic or something beautiful that you wanted to put in here. How do you do that? So if you've got a JPEG, for example, or another image, you can just go online to a bunch of different websites. One of them is convertio.co, but you can search for your own and find whichever one you like the best. This one is linked in the description at the bottom of the video, so just check it out if you want. And here is an example where you just upload it, the JPEG, and it'll convert to an HDR. And once that's exported, you can bring it right into Unreal. And to show you guys, this is one of the ones that I converted. Originally, this texture was huge. It was 20,000 by 10,000, which is definitely probably not recommended. The max supported texture for Unreal is 8192 by 8192 right now. So I made this 8,000 by 4,000, which probably didn't make a ton of sense, but it's good enough for the moment. So I'm going to drag that over, and obviously, you can see it's green, so when you have it green, you've done it right, and you can drag it into your cube map, and it'll switch out. If you didn't convert it properly, or if you've got a different resolution image, or, different type of image, it'll be red, and it won't work, so that's how you know. Once you get it in, you can change a bunch of these settings, and I've already made some of these tweaks, but let's go back to the import basics and show you guys what it would look like when you're importing something from scratch. So here we can set this to 0. You'll see immediately there's a big change in the resolution display. It looks much more blurry. It's not as sharp, not as nice at all. And this is because we've changed the maximum texture size here in the HDR texture settings to 0. And you can change this all the way up to 16,000 if you wanted to, but there really isn't a point in doing that because, like I said, the max in-game resolution is 8192 by 8192. And if you think about what this is a cube map. So you've got a cube which has 6 sides. So you're taking this by this, which is your square, and multiplying it onto 6 different sides. So you have to take this image and stretch it out onto 6 different squares. So what makes sense to do here? Well, you got to multiply whatever number you put in here times 6, and whatever that number is the important one. So for us, what is the resolution of this? 8,000 by 4,000. So I'm going to use 2048 because 2048 times 6 is a little bit bigger than this, but it's close enough that Unreal is good with it, and it's not going to kill my performance. So 2048, and it'll default to these different values. So if I put in 2000, I think it'll still go to 2048. Yeah. So, you know, whatever number is closest to the preferred from Unreal, it'll default to. So just realize that it'll, you know, change it if you don't put in the exact number, which is fine because that's just what it wants. But just to show you guys the difference here, you know, I can crank this up to like 16,000, and I've cached this out so it won't take very long, but just be aware that this could like take a really long time or crash Unreal if you're not on a high-end machine. So just be careful with this. You know, you can do the same thing if you go all the way up to like 4K or 8K. Just because, again, it's getting multiplied by 6. So you've got 16,000, and I put that in, and it'll default to 16,384. And you literally see no change because you've already maxed out your texture size at that resolution of 2048. So going to 16 gets you nowhere because you've got no extra information in there to put on these different sides, these 6 different sides of your cube map. So we're going to go back to 2048, and again, you'll see it doesn't change at all. And again, if we go to 0, it changes a lot. And, you know, 16, sharper, but again, 2048, and bam, nothing is different. So we're just going to leave it at 2048 because that's cool. And I, you know, change these two as well. You don't have to, but, you know, for what I'm doing, I just kind of wanted those there. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Cool. And we're going to go ahead and use this, which I'm liking a lot. And we're going to start to now put in some different assets here into this little world. Before I do that, I'm going to drop in a directional light. I can spell. Which is going to act kind of, you know, like as the sun. And then I'm going to put in a post-process volume, which will dictate most of the global settings of our scene. So in the post-process volume, if you're not familiar with it, there's a ton of settings in here, and one of the things that I'm going to set up right out of the gate is I'm going to hit Infinite Extend Unbound, because basically what that does is it covers your whole scene. And you want that because otherwise, you know, this box is the only relative space that the post-process is affecting, and unless you like want to scale it out super specifically, or you're really trying to optimize your scene, you might as well just turn that thing on, because then you don't have to think about it. Some of the other things in here that, you know, you'll want to turn on are, you know, some of the ray tracing options and global illumination, and if you're working with translucent materials, things like that. And we'll get to that in a minute. I'll come down here and turn those on once I start laying in some materials. But actually, let's just do it now. So just to get started, when you're in your rendering features, go into your reflections, hit type, make sure it's set to ray tracing, not screen space. And again, you know, ray tracing only really works on RTX, so if you're not on an RTX card, just leave it on screen space because there's no point. And you can also chain, I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to turn on motion blur. I'm going to turn on my global illumination. I'm going to turn on final gather because I like that. Make that 10, 20. 20. Alright, so let's see, what else are we going to do? I'm going to leave all of this alone. Alright, so translucency. I don't know if I'm going to do anything with translucency or not. Maybe I'll do a little bit wider, but regardless, let's just put it on ray tracing because you want those reflections to be nice and shiny and beautiful. And you can, you know, change all these things if you want. I'm going to actually change it to area shadows, but that's the only thing. Let's do this too. Fraction. Shadows, area shadows. And these, you know, just change kind of the way that the shadows are cast. And I just like area shadows that are a little bit softer. Hard shadows are harder, and just able to dissolve. So those are your options. Max bounce, 10 samples, 20. Cool. And, you know, you'll have to mess with these, find what works for you. I, you know, could be kind of off base with some of these things, but this is just kind of like what I'm putting in based on my experience with Flame and Nuke and Blender, and, you know, we're just going to roll with that. So if anybody wants to yell at me for these settings, feel free, but don't be too much of a dick because it's not cool. Anyway, just make sure, you know, that some of these are on. Make sure that ray tracing is enabled and all of that stuff. And then you can also go up to your bloom area. And standard is great, but convolution is beautiful, and I'll show you guys what the difference is in a bit. I'm going to leave it on for standard, and we'll get into that once we see the difference. One of the other things that I'm going to change is the exposure. Just want to make sure that it's set to auto exposure. You can change this to manual if you want, and set it up yourself, but I don't really want to do that, so I'm going to use auto exposure here. And you can also change it a little bit with compensation, as well as some of the other settings down here. I'm just going to make this like 0.6 or something like that. Under lit as well, just to note, exposure here is, you have to have game settings checked. If this isn't on, it won't work, and it'll just use whatever you're setting in this little exposure slider is. So it's a little misleading, because if this is set up like this and you're not using post-process volume, and then you go to use a camera and export, the exposure is a little wonky and you end up having to like manually set it. So just turn this on here and it'll all be your friend. And you're going to be lighting based on the HDRI anyway, so it's fine. So we're just going to keep that on for game settings, and also just to make sure that we're using the post-process volume, and we're just going to leave it like that. And if we need to, we'll tweak our lights a little bit, and we can make the scene a little bit brighter or darker. Also, in the HDRI backdrop, you can change the skylight brightness, because there is a light inside there too. So if we split that in half, you can see that that's getting lighter and darker. It's not super drastic. You'll notice more of a change on meshes and things like that, but it can also help. But again, you're dictated by the lighting of your HDR, so you should be matching that anyway. And you can rotate this directional light around, and once you have some stuff in there, I'll show you what that looks like. But it can help change time of day and stuff like that, and cast shadows in certain directions. You can also use temperature, which is cool, because if you're trying to do like a sunset, you can make it orange, or you can make it like a little bit bluer if you want for nighttime or something. We're just gonna leave it like that for the moment. We're gonna start laying in some materials here. So let's go into our Quixel folder and let's start dropping in some different assets. So I'm gonna pull in this carpet. Gonna pull in some stairs. What else do I want? I'm gonna put in a floor too, just to kind of help visualize this a little bit, and you can do this pretty easily with a sphere. I mean a cube. What's wrong with me? Jeez. So I'm gonna squeeze this bad boy down, and then I'm just gonna pull it out. Cool. So now we have a little floor. It's super bright, so let's put a texture on it. We'll go into our Quixel folder. Well, what do we want to put on there? I don't want to do that. I want to put on, let's use the Roman brick floor. Great. So you can see this is huge because I made this plane really big. It's too big, so we're gonna go back down on these two values here. So I'm gonna make this 5 and this one 5, and then we'll pull him back, and that's still kind of too big, so let's scale him more here, a little there, a little there. Alright, cool. And then we can start tiling it up. So let's just drag it out, and you can do this by holding Alt and then clicking on the actual parameter. Cool. So we've got kind of a tiled up floor here, and you can make these as seamless as you want, or you can do whatever, but I don't really need these to be quite perfect because I'm not really going to be seeing these with the scene that we're going to be doing. So we can, just leave it like that for now. I'm going to go ahead and drop down this directional light because it's pretty bright. So let's make this like 3. And you can see these a little bit better. So that's like pretty good. You can obviously see there's a bunch of repeating patterns, but we can deal with that later. I just kind of want to get like a base down for what we're going to be building. And I'm going to pull this over, put him here. I'm going to rotate him a little bit so that he's lined up properly. I'm going to zoom back. And this texture kind of looks like this already because I was messing with it a lot, but I'll show you guys kind of like what you can do to sort of get some things looking different. We're going to make that look even better. So I'm going to take this pulpit here. Oh man, Seizure City. I'm going to take the pulpit and I'm going to make it bigger because I need this to be bigger. Cool, so now it'll actually like feed into the stairs. You can pull the stairs back a little bit. Pull this forward. This bad boy down. Cool. So now I'm going to duplicate this and rotate them just to get some variance. Cool. So now we've got, a little brick walkway we can start building from. And we've got our little stairs that lead up to it. Maybe we want walls too. So let's go and see if we can find a wall. Imaged brick castle wall. Cool. Alright, so let's put that in there. You'll see this Megascan isn't really very thick, so you just got to be careful with this one, and different ones like this, and only use it for, specific things like, cinematics and stuff, or, certain angles in games where things are closed off from behind, because otherwise you'll be able to tell, and somebody's going to see it. So we'll tile this up too. So now we've got, like a nice little base area here we can start to build on and create some variants and some other things for our scene. Let's also put like a nice little Roman statue in there and see. Cool. Make them bigger. Those are too big. Alright, that's good. Cool. So now that we've got this all sort of like lined up, let's start like, making some tweaks and changes. This is a little too white for me, so I'm going to go into my material here and I'm going to mess around with the albedo controls. So you can tint the albedo as well as brighten and light it. So I want to darken the albedo a little bit, so I'm going to pull it towards the blue channel. And then I'm going to tint it to be a little bit red. It's looking pretty nice. So leave that like that. And then I'm also going to do the same thing here with this texture. I'm going to tweak the shade of it a little bit. We'll also do the tint. Whoa. Cool. This as well. can use brightness too if you want. I don't know why I like using color wheel. Makes me feel fancy. And saturation is a weird one because, like, depending on which way you slide it, the color will change accordingly. But it's not necessarily relative to like a true saturation in terms of like gets more saturated or desaturated. Like, that's desaturated. It gets bluer because it goes into the inverses. Everything can be negative and positive, just like life. All right, so we're going to leave it kind of a little bit overcranked just so we can get some of that nice little detail in the oranges. And, we'll leave the tint as it is because I like the way that looks. And, you can just click out and it'll save it for you, so you don't have to hit save every time. I don't like the way that this looks here, but we're not going to worry about that because we're not going to actually see this color in the final. So let's start laying in some other stuff. So now we've got a good base for our scene. We've got a bunch of different 3D objects in here, and now we can start to put in other things such as like rocks and debris, and we can start to layer up these different areas with different textures. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in some trim. Let's find that mosaic. And just rotate it, make sure that it's oriented properly. These things, they'll bound to objects in the area, which can be kind of annoying. So one of the things that you should probably do is on the X. For some reason, it's on X. I'm not 100% sure why, but again, it's probably based on a cube. So if you pull it down on X, it'll actually scale it down, and you can pull it, into a manageable place. I usually do like that, like 0.01, because if you go negative or if you go 0, it'll disappear. And then from there, you can kind of like, pull it accordingly as you want. In certain cases, that's not going to be tall enough because there's some height here, and it's going to like go into the Z and go below. So it might be better to do like 0.02 in this case, and you can see that it'll actually, overtake what we're looking for. You still kind of have to be a little bit concerned about the overlap, so it's good to kind of like, try and line stuff up as much as you can. Cool. So that's cool. You've got some nice variation in texture in there. It's a little heavy-handed for me just because of the juxtaposition, so I'm going to go ahead and go into my priority editor here of the details, and opacity is checked on so I can mess with that. You can see this is the matte that actually clips it out. So once I go down here, I can start to mess with my opacity. Let's make this like 0.2. That's looking kind of cool. Let's also change the brightness to be a little bit different. Let's start putting some debris and stuff in there now. There we go. Huge piece of paper. Some potholes. And you'll notice that this is looking a little bit strange right now. And one of the things you should know is that in sort order, you can actually change this to be like, above or below things. So make sure that you're, messing with the sort order if you're interested in making sure that it's a visible object. Because if you have multiple decals or multiple things on top of each other, you'll need to make sure that the sort order is set properly.